Ready? Welcome back to Fabrication 101, folks. It's great to have you guys back out in the shop with me today. We're going to be working on another little kind of shop project thing, something I need for the shop, some tools that I need. And we're going to be trying to reproduce this this shop stand, welding stand, work stand, whatever you want to call it. I've got three different adjustments, or I guess two different adjustments here. I've got a gross adjustment here, I've actually got these holes drilled at 2-inch spaces, but putting this extra hole here at 1 inch gives me 1 inch of adjustment on the post. And then I went ahead and added a threaded 3/4 fine thread nut or bolt to the end of that thing so that I could have some very fine adjustment, make this thing almost perfectly level if I can. So I'm going to try to be building these stands almost entirely out of scrap, because I've got all scrap material laying around over here, stuff left over from projects, stuff I've recovered from things. So we're going to try to make this as much out of scrap material and use as little new material as possible. So let's get started. We got a bunch of tubing to cut, some coping to do, and quite a bit of welding, but this should be a pretty fun project. So follow along. I hope you guys enjoy. All right, all these pieces are cut out. You can see some of these got quite a bit of stuff on them. These 3 pieces are actually part of the old seat mount in the old roll cage that came out of my Bronco. So I got to do obviously quite a bit of cleanup on these pieces, but I'd rather use this stuff up than use up some nice new metal. Although I do have to use one piece of good material, because that piece is going to slide inside of this piece here. And that's going to be part of my stand. So, all right, so here's a quick little tip on when it comes to grinding stuff like this. There's certain ways you want to do it because you don't want to create low spots in your material. So for this particular one, we want to take the grinding wheel and we want to stay on top of the metal and go this way. You want to try to avoid going across it like this, because what happens is as you fall off on this side, you create a low spot. As you fall off on this side, you're going to create a low spot in the material, and eventually what you'll end up, this will stay high, and you'll have this kind of wave shape in the top of the material. So you always want to try to go this way, so you stay on top. Not this way. What am I talking about? So you always want to try and stay on top of the material that you're trying to remove as much as possible. For like this one, this is going to be like the opposite. So this one, you're going to go this way on the material. And again, you don't want to go across it, because same thing's going to happen. You're going to create a low spot on either side, and you end up with a wave in the material. So it's important to keep your grinding wheel movement the same way. So anyway, I got a lot of grinding to do, a lot of cleanup to do on some of these pieces. Like this piece, I'm going to take advantage of this end because I do need to notch these tubes. And I'm going to notch this one here That way I don't have to worry about getting rid of that part. It's just gonna make my life a little easier, but I do need to clean this up, and a couple other spots. All right, all the pieces are, well, most all the pieces are cut out now. Now all I gotta do is lay out some holes, and I gotta drill a bunch of holes. So I went ahead and dragged my drill press out here on the table. Hopefully make this part a little bit easier. All right, so we gotta lay out a bunch of holes in these pieces here. First thing I gotta do is get a straight line on here. A lot of times I just like to use my good old speed square to do this kind of stuff. So I just lay it on there, and I can lay out my mark. What I'm going to do is I'm actually going to put 2 holes in this piece, and this is like the main collar that this piece is going to slide in and out of to create my stand. I'm going to put my first hole at 1 inch, right, and then I put another hole at 2 inches. And the reason I'm doing this is if I lay out a series of holes on this piece at 2 inches, having this one at 1 inch space actually gives me basically a 1 inch space on this piece without having to drill holes every 1 inch. So I can drill them every 2 inches on this piece, and it makes it a lot easier on us. So go ahead and move that piece out of the way so I can go ahead and get this one laid out. Just grabbed a scrap piece of angle iron here so I can lay out give myself a nice straight line to work from on that piece. And then I'm gonna go ahead and start at 2 inches on this one because I plan on putting an insert in here that's going to be threaded. That's going to allow the top part an adjustment to be. So I go every 2 inches, or pretty close to. It still gives me 2 inches of piece down inside of the sleeve once they're drilled. So now I got to go ahead and get these center punched and put them in my drill so I can go ahead and get these drilled. So here's a quick little trick on how to get things like perfectly, well, as close as I can without using any kind of a milling machine. I've got this centering drill bit in here. These are nice and solid, self-centering. Should be able to drill me a nice straight hole. But how do I get my piece of pipe nicely centered? And right now I'm not concerned about my marks. I just want to get the pipe centered underneath the drill bit. So one thing I can do is I usually use a small metal ruler for this, but take something like this hacksaw blade and you put it down on there and see how the blade is not level, but if I push this thing over just a little bit, the blade will come down a little bit more. Can't tell if it's quite level. This is kind of hard to do with one hand. Looks to me like it needs to come this way just a little bit. And there we go. Pretty level. Looks pretty close. That looks still a little bit off, but you get the idea. Once you can use both hands, it'll be a little bit easier. But that's a pretty quick, easy way to make sure you're drilling right in the center of that tube. Then you go ahead and clamp down your drill press vise to hold things in place for you. So we're going to go ahead and get some holes drilled. All right, we got all our pieces. They're all cleaned up and cut out. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to use the original piece of scrap tube that I cut out for this. I think those tubes had a bunch of little tabs welded to them in places, and I think what happened is the inside of the tube swelled a little bit, and it caused it to make where this piece would not slide nicely through these, so that we can have our adjustment here. So anyway, we've got these done. The next thing we need to do is figure out how to mark this tube on 3 different ways, or divide it into 3 parts, so that we can lay out our legs as they go around in 3 spots. So it's actually not that difficult. All you really need is a compass, something to mark on, and a way to measure, and it can be done pretty simply, and I'm going to show you how to do that right now. All right, so the real simple way to do this is take your compass, take your measuring device. We got to figure out where the halfway point is of our tube. We know it's an 1 3/4 tubing, so half of that 1 3/4 is 7/8 of an inch, or pretty close to, or exactly that. But we're going to set this as close as we can to that. I'm going to maybe go just a hair wider, just to make marking a little bit easier. So we got that marked. Simply enough, you're just going to draw your circle. Hopefully you guys will be able to see my silver streak marker here on the cardboard. Probably would be better if I actually had a pencil in this, but so anyway, there's my circle. Okay, and then all you really got to do is you got to mark a top and bottom. So we'll use our ruler again. We'll try to go as straight through our center as we can. And mine's a little off just because I went a little crazy with my point there, but that should be pretty close. And then what we're going to do is you take your compass again. Now you put your center point down here, and give yourself a mark on one side, and then turn it over and give yourself a mark on the other side. And now where those points intersect is now your 3 dimensions, or your 3 points around the circle. Pretty straightforward. The easiest way, I think, to go ahead and transfer this to the tube is going to be to take one of my center lines, or just create a new center line on the tube, and line that up with the 1 mark. And then all I got to do is come around to the other side, and I can transfer with a Sharpie my new marks. And then all I got to do is use my speed square here to carry those marks up higher, so that I can go ahead and line up the legs as they go around the tubes. All right, it's all tacked together. It looks pretty good. I'm pretty happy with the way that came together. I'm glad that this tube is big enough that I don't have to notch these so they don't run into each other. Should weld out pretty nicely. Got good, nice fit up on all the connections, all the joints. My only concern is that I don't want to overheat this tube to the point where it shrinks on the inside, and then the post doesn't slide down in there. But so far so good. So let's go ahead and get her welded up. All right, it's all welded up. It came out pretty good. Did have to do some cleanup inside of the tube so that this piece would slide up and down nicely, which it, oops, wrong way, which it does now. So the next thing I'm gonna do is I gotta build the top part, and I don't wanna just put a flat plate on here. What I'm gonna do is I wanna add some more adjustment to this point, like a fine adjustment here, because these will be my, what do you call it, gross adjustment or big adjustment. And up here I wanna have a fine adjustment. So what I'm gonna do is I got this chunk of old tie rod end. I think this might actually be the one that I had to shorten when I redid the front suspension on the Bronco. But anyway, this is tapped to 3/4 fine thread. And fortunately enough, it slides right down inside of this tube. So what I'm gonna do is cut it down so that it's just short enough so that this, or the top hole doesn't hit it. And then I'll get that welded in there. And then I can take this 3/4 fine thread bolt that threads in there, and I can make a top to it. And actually what's kind of cool about this idea here is that I can actually make, get other bolts and make different tops if I needed them for different applications. So I'm got a project coming up in the future where that's what I'm building these for. So I'm gonna put a piece of, I think, the square tube on here, maybe 6 or 8 inches wide. So I have a nice big T shape on the top of this piece. So first things we're gonna do is get this cut down a little bit because it's a little bit big, and it's actually nice enough. I don't know, I have to figure out which side the threads are. I might have to clean the threads up a little bit, but we'll get it cut down so it fits in there, and then we'll make the top piece for this. last step. I got that all welded up. Came out pretty nice. Put that up there, and hopefully I can get it to start without dropping it on the floor. Feels like it's in there, and it's in there. So this is going to be the fine adjustment for this thing. This gives me a lot of room. I got 2 inches here, so I should be able to put this within a pretty good range and then be able to adjust it. So again, we've got multiple points here, but with the hole here and the 2-inch spacing on this tube, it means that we've got 1 inch here, 1 inch here, not 1 inches. But this has got 2 inches, so I've got a lot of adjustment here. It should work really well. So anyway, came out pretty good. The next thing, to be honest, is I need to make a few more of these, because one of these stands is not going to be enough for the project I've got coming up. So let's try this. Well, there's 2. I think I need a couple more, so let's try it again. So that's going to do it for this episode of Fabrication 101. I hope you guys enjoyed this. Hope you learned something. Did I have to TIG weld these? No, I probably could have MIG welded them. I definitely could have MIG welded them all together. But I was using this as an excuse to work on my TIG welding skills and improve, and I feel like I did. So that was kind of my goal, not just to build these stands, but to give myself an excuse to practice and get something functional out of it. So I do have a project for these coming up. Hopefully that'll be starting here pretty soon. I'm still waiting on a few more things to finalize before I can start working on that stuff. But I built these. Where are they? Built these for a reason. I didn't build them just to have stands. I do need them for a project coming up. So hopefully you guys will see that in the next episode, or one of the next episodes of Fabrication 101. In the meantime, make sure you like, comment, subscribe if you haven't done so already. And as always, thank you for watching this episode of Fabrication 101. And in the meantime, do yourself a favor, do me a favor, and go build something.